Hello everyone, this is Nitpicking Nerd, and I want to add a few corrections and additions to my previous review of episode 2 of season 3 of Picard, in which I made a few small mistakes, so I'm willing to admit it when I'm wrong. It's been a while since I saw the TOS movies, it's been a few years, and in those movies there was that minor character Savik who got recast in the third and fourth movie, and in the sixth movie there was a different Vulcan lady who I think originally it was supposed to be the same character and once again got recast, but they changed the name to a different character, and a lot of people in the comment section corrected me, so thanks for that. I'm admitting that I'm not perfect, I don't have a perfect memory. I do have a perfect memory with everything that has to do with Star Trek TNG, because that's a show that I rewatched probably 100 times as a kid, because back then I didn't have many TV channels, I only had two channels, and I recorded Star Trek TNG, and it was on my VHS tapes, and I literally rewatched them whenever there was nothing else to do, nothing else to watch. So I do have a photographic memory about everything to do with TNG, but not so much the other Star Trek shows and movies, unfortunately. And another mistake I made in my review, that's something I should have rewatched before I made that point, is that I complained that they couldn't send a message from the Nebula to Starfleet, and I said how come Beverly Crusher could send the message to Picard's comm badge if her ship was in the same nebula, so it didn't make sense in my head. I should have rewatched the first episode, because in that scene in which she sends the message, right after that they jump to warp, presumably to that nebula to hide in it. So she sent the message before she went into the nebula, and so technically it's not a mistake, that's my mistake that I complained about it. I still think it's silly that she sent that specific message to the comm badge, and the whole part with her encrypting it with something that Picard wouldn't know about, unless they explain it later in the dialogue in the future episode, maybe it can work, but it also doesn't really make sense. So all my other points still stand. Now, some things that happen in the dialogue we can excuse away that the characters are not being totally serious, like the villain lady when she said good afternoon, I know it's afternoon in the Sol system, that sounds extremely stupid, but she did kind of chuckle after saying that, so we can say it's her joking, she's not being serious. And even when LaForge's daughter said that you can break a law of physics by using a different law of physics, maybe she's also not really meaning it literally, it's more like a half joke or something, so I can excuse away a lot of that silly dialogue, even though I wish it wouldn't be so silly, and I'm not so sure if it's supposed to be a joke or if the writers really don't know how these things work. And another small mistake I made when I complained about that scene of Worf killing that Ferengi, I said the Ferengi was unarmed, but if you look closely, he did have a small knife in his hand at the moment of his decapitation. That's the knife that Raffi stabbed him with. She stabbed him through the hand, and he simply took it out to free himself, and that was the moment when Worf cut off his head. So I guess maybe it's deliberately was done that way so that we wouldn't be able to say that's dishonorable. But still, it's kind of silly, first of all, because that Ferengi supposedly knew a whole bunch of secret information. So unless they explain later that Worf didn't need that information, he already had it, then that wasn't an issue. And of course, they deliberately also show that Ferengi beheaded someone else earlier, and he was going to behead Raffi, so he kind of deserved it. He kind of had it coming. So, morally wise, I don't feel sorry for that Ferengi. It's not as if he didn't deserve that. But what I'm saying is that if, Worf is working currently for Starfleet intelligence, he's not working for the Klingon Empire at the moment. Unless he tricked Raffi into thinking that. He's supposedly in Starfleet intelligence. Since when do Starfleet members go around killing criminals like vigilantes without putting them on trial, without arresting them? It doesn't seem to fit Starfleet's ideals, at least of the old Starfleet from the old shows. So that's a huge issue. If Worf is on a mission from Starfleet, why does he go around killing criminals? We, the audience, can say the criminals deserved it because they're nasty people who get their poetic justice in this scene. That's not my issue here. My issue is if he's working for Starfleet, Starfleet probably wouldn't look kindly on Worf being a vigilante and just killing anyone that deserves it in his mind without a proper trial and all of that. Would you like it if police officers were going around the streets just killing all the criminals without presenting any evidence to a court of law and all of that? And it's supposed to be a planet with a Starfleet presence on it, because that Starfleet building that got blown up in the first episode was on the same planet, so Starfleet has a presence there apparently, so they must have some diplomatic relationships with that planet, even if it's not a member of the Federation. And Worf is a member of Starfleet, and he just goes around the planet and just kills criminals without any court approval to do it, to execute people just because he wants to. And it wasn't exactly self-defense either, because even though that Ferengi did just raise some small knife, but he was obviously not a threat to Worf, and Worf could have cut off his hand or something. He didn't have to execute him on the spot. So unless it somehow all gets explained later conveniently that there was no other way, maybe there was a dampening field in that place that phasers wouldn't work and transporters wouldn't work, and so that's why Worf had to go in there with a sword, because he couldn't stun everyone in that room and he didn't have time to bring some other weapon, and so that's why he had to do it in that way. Then fine, but the show never even bothered to set that up, and that's the same problem I had with Elnor in season 1, that he just kills people with a sword and goes against people with guns and phasers, and basically he brings a knife to a gunfight, and it doesn't make sense unless they would have bothered to actually explain it. If they show that he has a personal force fields, or that many other opponents have personal force fields that prevent them from being fired at, and only with a sword you can defeat them, then that would make sense. That's like that scene in First Contact when Worf shoots a Borg and the Borg gets adapted to his phaser, and that's when he takes the sword out to take out that last Borg drone, because the phaser wouldn't work anymore. And so that made sense, and it was both cool and it made sense at the same time. And yet in these recent Star Trek shows, people just use swords just because it looks cool, even though it makes no sense. He could have brought a phaser to that meeting and just stunned everyone in the room and then take Raffi out without killing anyone, and yet he decided to go in there with a sword. Now, if in the next scene with Worf he says there was a dampening field in that place and that's why I had to use a sword, then that could alleviate some of my problems with it, but I'm pretty sure they'll not bother to do that. We can assume maybe that's the case and we simply didn't hear about it, but I get the sense that the writers simply don't care, just like with Elnor in season 1. It's not that I have a problem in general with having an action scene with swords. I love to see that too. I just wish it would have been explained in the plot, and that's one of the things that was clever in the old shows, the whole thing with the Klingons having an honor culture and all of that. And that's why they fight with swords. In those situations in which honor simply requires it because of their traditions and all of that, it's part of what made the Klingons fun, the fact that we got to see some swords fights and stuff like that, but it made sense with the context because it's part of their culture. So they were fighting each other in an honorable way. They were not stabbing each other from the back. So here it doesn't really make sense because he's not facing other Klingons, he's not announcing his presence and then doing a proper duel with someone. He's stabbing someone from the back. That's the first guy he kills who didn't even see him coming. He stabbed him from the back and then just beheads everyone. So it wasn't a matter of honor in the scene. It's not like he's giving them a proper chance to defend themselves or something. He just kills them. So why do that if he could just use a phaser, especially since he's working for Starfleet at this moment? So stuff like that, I think with minor corrections they could have easily fixed this problem, do it slightly differently in a way that wouldn't dishonor Worf. So I still have a problem with that scene. And I think if it was slightly done differently with the proper setup, then it could have worked perfectly and I would have been perfectly happy with it, but they didn't. The way it was done, it didn't really make sense. If that Ferengi, instead of a small knife, if he picked up a grenade, and the sad thing, we saw a grenade on his shelf in the beginning of that scene. They showed us that he's a collector of all the Earth things, and one of the things he had was a grenade. If he picked up that grenade and then Worf killed him, then it would have made sense, because that grenade would have killed anyone in the room, and that's why Worf had to disarm him quickly. And so if they would have done some small changes to the scene, it would have been much better, but they didn't bother to. I don't think anyone cares in these new shows. That's one of my problems with them, that it's always so nihilistic, so dark, and with no morality. It's always, well, let's just kill everyone, and no one cares to even try to save someone, unlike in the old shows. In the older shows, there was a sense of morality that the heroes of the shows only kill people when they have to, and there is no other way. It's the last resort. They always first tried other ways, or non-lethal ways, and only if nothing else works, that's when they kill someone. And yes, Dr. Crusher also killed a few people back in TNG, but it was only in those situations when there was no other way. One time there was that alien with multiple organs who faked his own death, and suddenly he was on the shuttle with her trying to kill her, and she first tries to stun him with the phaser and it wouldn't work. Then she turns up the setting and it literally drills a hole in him, but he's still coming because of his physiology, so he cannot be brought down by the non-lethal ways, and only then she vaporizes him when there is no other choice. And so I love the fact that she didn't immediately vaporize him or immediately behead him. She first tried to kick him, then she tried to stun him and it didn't work, then she put a bigger hole in him and he was still coming, and only then she vaporized him. And so there is no morality problem with that scene, because it was all in self-defense with no other way, and we still got a cool scene. It's even cooler that way, because it's not that she quickly kills him and that's it. She tried other ways, and the fact that he has a hole in his stomach and keeps coming, that makes it even cooler. And so the way they do it now, if that scene was shot now, she would have just immediately killed him right away without any attempts to bring him down in a non-lethal way first. And that's the kind of scene we had in the beginning of the season when we see Dr. Crusher shooting people who come to her ship. That is self-defense, but at one point she shoots one of them in the leg or something and he falls down to the ground, and then she comes near him and shoots him while he's lying on the ground and terminates him. And so that's kind of immoral. Why couldn't she somehow capture him alive or something like that? It would also be more beneficial maybe to keep him alive for information. I mean, they say they don't know why they are being hunted. They said that they don't know why the bad guys are trying to catch them. So wouldn't that be a good idea to keep one of them alive, to ask him why they're doing that, or to keep him just as a bargaining chip, something like that? Why do you have to kill him right away if he's not an immediate threat? And so that kind of ruins the character of Dr. Crusher when she kills someone when apparently she didn't have to. Unless, again, if they explain it later, then it would make sense why she had to do that. Then I can forgive it. But so far, we didn't hear such an explanation. And one of the theories I suggested is saying maybe the bad guys of this season are those conspiracy bugs from way back in season 1 of TNG, and maybe all the aliens we see are actually possessed by them. And that's why she had to vaporize him immediately, because she couldn't risk that bug getting out and maybe infecting her or her son, and that's why she had to quickly vaporize him, and maybe there's no way to save the host after it gets infected. If these are some newer, better bugs which are more aggressive or something, they could have explained that somehow, and then that scene would be perfectly fine. But according to recent information from people who have seen the new season in its entirety, the conspiracy bugs are not going to be any part of the plot, unfortunately. And so that excuse doesn't work. Why didn't she capture that alien then? And also, if the conspiracy bugs are not involved, then what's the point of hiding what's going on from the rest of Starfleet? Why did Dr. Crusher tell Picard, don't trust anyone, don't tell Starfleet? I guess it was only done that way so that there wouldn't be a whole fleet showing up to help, because that would make it too easy. And so for the purposes of the season, having only one starship in that nebula fighting the bad guys, that's why they cannot tell the rest of Starfleet, and there is no logical explanation for that. So I think that's a missed opportunity. If the conspiracy bugs were involved, then it would make sense why she vaporized that guy. Then it makes sense why she doesn't want the rest of Starfleet to know, because maybe a lot of the admirals in Starfleet are already possessed, just like it was the case in season 1 of TNG. And it's such a huge missed opportunity, because, that could have explained why everything is so nasty. How come Starfleet seems to be so nasty in these new Star Trek shows? From way back in season 1 of the show, Picard was complaining Starfleet is no longer Starfleet, it's so evil now and all of that. They could have had a cameo of that bitch admiral revealing that she was possessed by a bug, and that's why she was evil, that's why she hated Picard. And they could have explained the evil Starfleet thing away by revealing once again they got possessed, and again by those kinds of bugs. And this time the bugs maybe upgraded themselves, maybe they're harder to find, maybe it's more difficult now to get rid of them and all of that. That could have been a cool, I think, villain of the season. It could have been a surprise somewhere in the middle of the season. And so I think it's a missed opportunity. And even that ship of the bad guys, it kind of looks similar to those bugs. It has the same kind of pincers at the front. And how cool would it have been if no one answered their hails, and if that ship just kept attacking them, seemingly without any crew on board, and then later on it would be revealed that the entire ship is some kind of biomechanoid giant bug itself, that it's not a starship with a crew on it, but it's actually part of the invasion force of those bugs, which are finally coming to conquer the Federation. It's just the first one of their ships, which they have to defeat in the nebula, and there would be no silly villain showing up on the screen to taunt them and all of that. There will be complete silence from that starship. It wouldn't answer their hails. It would just keep trying to destroy them, and then it will be revealed it's actually part biological starship, that is basically a massive giant bug that is hunting them. That could be creepy and scary, just like the Borg were scary in their first appearance, when there wasn't some face on the screen you can talk to, but it's just some unstoppable force coming to kill you. And so if they have like a swarm of those ships coming and there is no negotiating with them, that would be much more creepier. Of course, at some point they can negotiate with some of the bugs which infested the humans, and so maybe at some point they could have ended the conflict by talking with them after defeating their invasion force. I think the season could have been so much more interesting if it did something new and different, and not just the same kind of Khan-like villain hunting them in a nebula and all of that, which we saw so many times before. If instead they did something new, some more creepy, different science fiction idea of those starships which are not actually manned by a crew, but actually are giant bugs who want to conquer the Federation, to just infest everyone, to make everyone part of their giant organism, something like that, kind of like the Zerg in StarCraft. An idea like that, which obviously would be more visually challenging, but I think that would have made it so much more interesting and creepy and mysterious, and I think it would have been better. So I feel as if this season is once again a missed opportunity. Maybe I'm wrong, maybe the rest of the episodes will be much better. I hope that is the case. Maybe it will get better and better as we go. I really hope so. I'm hoping those rumors of the season being so much better are true, even though the first episodes, in my opinion, were not really that great and kind of disappointing. But we'll wait and see. So let me know what you think, and we can discuss all of this in the comments below. And I will see you all next time. Bye bye.